The wrench slipped from Daniel's hand and clattered against the metal floor. He froze, listening. The sound came again from the back room, a soft whimpering that made his chest tighten. He wiped the grease from his fingers and walked quickly through the narrow doorway of his small home on Redstone Point. Ash was curled in the corner, her silver scales trembling. Even at 3 years old, she was already the size of a large horse, though she tried to make herself smaller. Her wings were tucked tight against her body, and her golden eyes were squeezed shut. Another bad dream. Daniel knelt beside her, placing his hand on her snout. Her scales were warm under his palm. She opened her eyes and nodded. Dragons could not speak in human tongues until they were older, but she understood everything. Daniel had made sure of that. He had taught her to read, to write, to think for herself. Things the Empire never wanted their war dragons to learn. "You are safe here," he said quietly. "I promise." Ash made a low rumbling sound in her throat. It was not quite a purr, but close enough. She pressed her head against his shoulder, careful not to knock him over with her strength. Daniel remembered the day he found her. 3 years ago, he had been working as a contract engineer at an Imperial breeding facility. The pay was good, and he had not asked too many questions about what they did there. But one night, he heard the sounds coming from the termination wing. Young dragons that were too small, too weak, or too gentle were disposed of. The Empire had no use for dragons that would not fight. He had found Ash in a cage marked for processing. She was barely bigger than a dog then, covered in scars from rough handling. Her eyes had been dull with fear and hunger. When he opened the cage, she had not run. She had just looked at him with those golden eyes, waiting for more pain. Daniel had not planned to become a thief that night. He had not planned to throw away his career and his life. But he could not walk away from those eyes. He smuggled her out in a cargo container filled with spare parts, and they ran. They had been running ever since. "Come on," he said, standing up. "Let me make you breakfast." Ash followed him into the main room. The home was small, just 2 rooms and a workshop attached to the side. Daniel had modified everything to fit a growing dragon. The doorways were wider, the ceiling reinforced, and he had cut a large opening in the roof so Ash could get fresh air at night. When no one was watching, he pulled out a large slab of dried meat from the cooling unit. Dragon food was expensive, especially for someone living on a mining colony at the edge of known space. Daniel worked double shifts at the colony's water treatment facility just to afford it. He also took odd repair jobs from anyone who needed them. The colonists paid in cash or food, and they did not ask about the large creature living in his home. Ash ate quickly, tearing into the meat with her sharp teeth. Daniel made himself a simple meal of bread and some kind of canned protein that tasted like cardboard. He did not mind. Ash needed the good food more than he did. "I have to go to work soon," he told her. "Ruby is coming by to check on you." Ash made a worried sound. She did not like being alone, but she understood. During the day, she had to stay hidden. If anyone from the Empire saw her, it would be over. They would take her back to the breeding pens, and Daniel would be executed for theft of Imperial property. Ruby was the colony administrator. She was a tough woman with gray hair and a face that had seen too much. She had figured out Daniel's secret about 6 months ago when she came by for an unexpected inspection. Instead of reporting him, she had simply said, "That dragon better not cause any trouble." Since then, she checked on Ash during the day while Daniel worked. She even brought books sometimes, old novels she thought Ash might enjoy. Daniel finished his meal and cleaned up. He grabbed his tool bag and gave Ash one last pat on the head. "Be good. Read your book. Ruby will be here in an hour." Ash watched him leave with sad eyes. Daniel hated leaving her alone, but there was no choice. They needed the money, and he needed to keep up appearances. If he suddenly stopped working or started acting strange, people would notice. The walk to the water facility took 15 minutes. Redstone Point was not a large colony, maybe 200 people total. Most of them were miners, pulling rare minerals from the asteroid fields nearby. A few were farmers growing food in underground greenhouses. The rest were people like Daniel, workers who kept the colony running. The facility was loud and hot. Giant machines pumped water from deep underground, filtered it, and distributed it through pipes to every building. Daniel spent his day fixing a broken valve and replacing worn seals. It was simple work, but it kept him busy. During lunch break, he sat outside and ate another tasteless meal. The sky above was clear, and he could see stars even during the day. Redstone Point had a thin atmosphere, barely enough to breathe. Everything here was harsh and unforgiving. Oliver, the transport pilot, sat down next to him. He was a young man with a friendly smile and a ship that had seen better days. "You hear the news?" Oliver asked. Daniel looked at him. "What news?" "Imperial patrol spotted in the sector. Doing inspections," they said. Daniel's stomach dropped. "When?" "2 days ago. They hit the colony on Break Ridge, then moved on." Oliver took a bite of his sandwich. "Probably nothing. They do sweeps every few months." Daniel nodded, but his hands were shaking. He put down his food, suddenly not hungry. Imperial patrols meant inspections. Inspections meant questions. Questions meant danger. "You okay?" Oliver asked. "Fine," Daniel lied. "Just tired." He finished his shift as quickly as possible and hurried home. His mind raced with possibilities. Maybe the patrol would skip Redstone Point. Maybe they would just check the main buildings and leave. Maybe they would not find Ash, but deep down, he knew the truth. If the Empire came looking, they would not stop until they found what they wanted. He opened the door to his home and saw Ash reading a book Ruby had left. She looked up and immediately sensed his fear. Daniel closed the door and locked it. "We might have a problem," he said quietly. Ash set down the book. Her golden eyes were wide with concern. "Imperial patrol in the sector," Daniel explained. "They might come here." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel knelt down and put his arms around her neck as much as he could. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "No matter what happens, I will not let them take you. Do you understand? I will keep you safe." Ash pressed against him, and Daniel felt her trembling. He wished he could promise that everything would be fine. He wished he could guarantee their safety, but all he could do was hold his daughter and hope that the Empire would pass them by. The screens flickered to life across every building in Redstone Point. Daniel was replacing a water pump when the emergency broadcast signal cut through the colony's communication system. Every worker stopped what they were doing and looked up. The face that appeared on the screens was known across the entire galaxy. Empress Cerelia sat on her throne, dressed in ceremonial armor that gleamed like starlight. Her expression was cold and composed, the face of someone who had ruled absolutely for 20 years. "Citizens of the Empire," her voice echoed through speakers. 3 years ago, a valuable asset was stolen from an Imperial breeding facility. This asset is a young dragon, marked as property of the Dragon Corps. The individual responsible for this theft is believed to be hiding in the border colonies. Daniel felt his blood turn to ice. Around him, other workers whispered and pointed at the screen. No one was looking at him yet, but they would. They would remember that he used to work for the Empire. They would start asking questions. A substantial reward is offered for information leading to the recovery of Imperial property, the Empress continued. Imperial seekers will be dispatched to conduct thorough investigations. Cooperation is expected. Resistance will not be tolerated. The screen went dark. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the supervisor started barking orders to get back to work. Daniel grabbed his tools with shaking hands and tried to focus. His mind was racing. The Empress herself had made the announcement. That meant this was serious. That meant they were not going to give up, that he needed to get home. He needed to get to Ash. Daniel worked as quickly as he could, forcing himself to act normal. When his shift finally ended, he walked home at a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow. Running would draw attention. But inside, every instinct screamed at him to sprint. Ruby was waiting outside his door. Her face was grim. "Inside," she said quietly. "Now." Daniel unlocked the door, and they both entered. Ash was hiding in the back room, but Daniel could hear her breathing, quick and scared. Ruby closed the door and locked it. "I knew you had a dragon. I did not know she was stolen Imperial property." "She is not property," Daniel said firmly. "She is my daughter. The Empire does not see it that way." Ruby crossed her arms. "Imperial seekers will be here within days. Maybe sooner. They will search every home, every building. They will interrogate everyone. Then we leave, Daniel said. Tonight. On what ship? Every transport is monitored. The moment you try to board with her, they will know. Ruby shook her head. I'm sorry, Daniel. I truly am. But there is nowhere to run. Ash emerged from the back room. She moved slowly, her head low. When she reached Daniel, she pressed against his side. Ruby looked at the young dragon, and her expression softened. She is beautiful. Gentle, too. Not like the war dragons I have seen. That is why they were going to kill her, Daniel said bitterly. She was not aggressive enough. Not useful enough. I have kept your secret for months, Ruby said. But when the Seekers arrive, I cannot lie to them. They have ways of knowing, ways of finding out. I'm not asking you to lie for me. Daniel put his hand on Ash's neck. I'm asking for time. A few hours. That is all. Ruby was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. There is an old mining shaft on the eastern edge of the colony. It goes deep, abandoned for years. If you hide her there, the Seekers might not find her right away. But, Daniel, they will search everywhere eventually. A few hours, Daniel repeated. That is all I need. After Ruby left, Daniel packed quickly. He filled a bag with food, water, blankets, and a portable light. Ash watched him with frightened eyes. We are going to hide you somewhere safe, he explained. Just for a little while. Until I can figure out what to do. Ash made a low, distressed sound. She did not want to be separated. I know, Daniel said gently. I know. But if they find you here, they will take you immediately. At least in the mine, we have time. He waited until darkness fell completely. Then he let Ash out through the back way, staying in the shadows. The colony was quiet, most people inside their homes. They moved quickly across the rocky ground to the eastern edge where the old mining equipment sat rusting in the thin air. The shaft entrance was partially collapsed, but there was enough room for Ash to squeeze through. Daniel climbed down first with the light, and Ash followed. Her claws scraped against the metal ladder, and he worried about the noise, but no one came. The shaft went down about 50 feet before opening into a larger chamber. It was cold and dark, but it was hidden. Daniel set up the blankets and food, making the space as comfortable as possible. I will come back tonight with more supplies, he promised. And tomorrow night, as often as I can. Ash looked at him with terrified eyes. She was trying to be brave, but she was still young, still scared. Daniel hugged her as tightly as he could. You are safe now, he whispered, even though he was not sure if it was true. I will not let them take you. I promise. He left her there in the darkness and climbed back up. His heart felt like it was being ripped in half, but he had no choice. If the Seekers found her at his home, it would be over immediately. At least this way, they had a chance. The next morning, 3 Imperial ships dropped out of hyperspace and entered orbit around Redstone Point. Daniel watched from his workshop window as the sleek vessels positioned themselves above the colony. They were smaller than warships, but heavily armed. Seeker vessels, designed for hunting and extraction. Oliver appeared at Daniel's door an hour later. His face was pale. They are landing, he said. 6 Seekers, led by someone named Iris. She has a reputation for always finding what she is looking for. How long do we have? Daniel asked. They're setting up a command post now. Interrogations start tomorrow. Oliver paused. I can get my ship ready. If you need to run, I will help. They will be watching every ship, Daniel said. I know. Oliver met his eyes. But I owe you. You fixed my engine when I had no money. You never asked for repayment. So if you need to run, I will get you out. Even if it means I never fly again. Daniel felt a surge of gratitude. Humans helping humans. It was what the Empire never understood. They ruled through fear and power, but they could not stop people from caring about each other. Thank you, Daniel said quietly. I will let you know. That night, he brought more food and water to Ash. She was curled in the corner of the chamber, trying to stay warm. He sat with her for an hour, reading from one of her favorite books by the light of the portable lamp. Whatever happens, he told her, remember that you are not property. You are not a weapon. You are my daughter, and you are loved. Ash pressed her head against his chest. In the darkness of the abandoned mine, they held onto each other and waited for the storm to come. The interrogation room was small and windowless. Daniel sat in a metal chair bolted to the floor while Iris paced in front of him. She was tall and thin, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see through everything. Her uniform was immaculate, and her movements were precise. "You worked at the Kronos breeding facility 3 years ago," she said. It was not a question. "I did," Daniel answered calmly. "I was a contract engineer. I fixed machines. And you left suddenly. No notice. No forwarding address." Iris stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "Why?" "The contract ended. I wanted to move to the border colonies." Interesting timing. Iris pulled up a datapad and scrolled through information. "You left exactly 2 days after Dragon went missing from the termination wing. A runt. Too small for combat training." Daniel kept his face neutral. "I had nothing to do with that. Security footage shows you entering the termination wing that night. You claimed you were checking the environmental controls." Iris smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The environmental controls are in a completely different building. I must have gotten lost." The facility was large. Iris set down the datapad and leaned close. "I have been doing this for 15 years, Daniel. I always find what I'm looking for. Always. You can make this easy, or you can make this difficult. Either way, I will recover Imperial property." "I do not have what you are looking for," Daniel said. "Then you will not mind if we search your home." Daniel's stomach clenched, but he forced himself to shrug. "Search whatever you want." He was taken back to his home under guard. 2 seekers went through every room, every drawer, every corner. They scanned for heat signatures, checked for hidden compartments, and even examined his personal belongings. Ash's books were there, the ones he had been reading to her. The seekers looked at them briefly, but did not seem to think they were important. After 2 hours, they found nothing. Iris was not pleased. "Where is the dragon?" she demanded. "I told you. I do not have a dragon." Then explain the modified doorways, the reinforced ceiling, the unusual food purchases. Iris gestured around the small home. "This place has been altered for something large." "I like having space," Daniel said. "And I eat a lot." Iris stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to her team. "Expand the search. Check every building, every mine shaft, every cave within 10 kilometers. She is here somewhere." Daniel was placed under house arrest. Guards stood outside his door, watching his every move. He could not go to Ash. He could not bring her food or water. All he could do was sit in his home and worry. 2 days passed. Daniel barely slept. He kept thinking about Ash alone in the dark mine, cold and hungry and scared. The food he had left would run out soon. The water, too. She would be terrified, wondering if he had abandoned her. That on the 3rd day, something happened that changed everything. Ash emerged from the mine shaft. Daniel heard about it from the guards talking outside his door. The young dragon had climbed up from her hiding place and was flying toward the colony center. People were shouting, pointing at the sky. The seekers were mobilizing. Daniel's heart stopped. He ran to the window and saw her, silver scales gleaming in the sunlight. She was flying straight toward the gathered seekers, toward the command post they had set up in the colony square. "No," Daniel whispered. "No, Ash, do not do this." But he understood why she was doing it. She thought she was saving him. She thought that if she surrendered, the seekers would leave him alone. He ran to the door, but the guards blocked his way. "Let me through," Daniel shouted. "She is going to get herself hurt. Stay inside," one guard ordered. Daniel shoved past them. They grabbed him, but he fought with everything he had. He had to reach Ash. He had to stop her from giving up. More guards arrived and restrained him. They dragged him outside, where he could see the colony square clearly. Ash had landed in the center, surrounded by seekers with weapons drawn. But she was not fighting. She was sitting calmly, her wings folded, her head bowed. Then she began to sing. The sound was unlike anything Daniel had ever heard. It was deep and resonant, filled with emotion that words could not capture. It was a song about loneliness and hope, about fear and love, about a small dragon who had found a home and a father who had given her everything. Everyone stopped. The seekers lowered their weapons, confused. The colonists who had gathered to watch stood frozen. Even the guards holding Daniel loosened their grip. Dragons in the Empire did not sing. They were trained from birth to suppress that instinct. Singing was seen as a sign of independence, of individual thought. War dragons followed orders. They did not express feelings. But Ash was singing, and it was beautiful. Iris strode forward, her face hard. "Silence," she commanded. Ash stopped singing and looked at the seeker. Her golden eyes were calm. "You're coming with us," Iris said. "You are Imperial property, and you will return to the breeding facility." Ash shook her head slowly. She opened her mouth, and for the first time, she spoke in human tongue. Her voice was young and uncertain, but clear. "I am not property. I am Ash. I have a father. His name is Daniel." The crowd gasped. Dragons learning to speak was rare and always carefully controlled by the Empire. But Ash had learned on her own, taught by a human who saw her as a daughter, not a weapon. Ruby stepped forward from the crowd. "That dragon has lived in this colony for 3 years," she lied boldly. "She is registered as a colony pet. We have documentation." It was a desperate bluff, and everyone knew it. But other colonists began nodding, backing up the story. "She has never caused trouble," one miner added. "She helped us once when a cave collapsed." Another said, inventing details, "Cleared the rubble with her strength." Iris looked around at the gathered colonists, her expression darkening. "You are all lying, and lying to Imperial authorities is a crime." "Then arrest all of us," Ruby said firmly. The standoff stretched out. More colonists moved forward, standing between the Seekers and Ash. They were not warriors. They were miners and farmers and engineers. But they were standing their ground. Daniel felt something break open in his chest. These people barely knew him. They had no reason to risk Imperial punishment. But they were doing it anyway because they saw what he saw. A young dragon who deserved freedom. A father willing to sacrifice everything for his daughter. Iris raised her communicator. "Command, this is Seeker Team 7. We have located the target, but there's a situation. Requesting backup and authorization for forceful extraction." The response came quickly. "Backup authorized. Stand by." Daniel struggled against the guards. "Ash," he shouted. "Ash, fly away. Please." But Ash did not move. She sat in the center of the square, surrounded by seekers and colonists, waiting for whatever would come next. The sky above them darkened. A massive shadow fell across the colony. Daniel looked up and felt his blood run cold. An Imperial dreadnought was descending through the atmosphere, larger than any ship he had ever seen. Its hull was decorated with the Empress's seal. Cerelia herself had come to Redstone Point. The dreadnought landed on the outskirts of the colony with a roar of engines that shook the ground. Its landing ramp lowered, and a full company of Imperial guards marched out in perfect formation. They wore black armor and carried weapons designed to kill, not stun. Behind them came the Empress. Cerelia was shorter than Daniel expected, but her presence filled the space around her. She wore ceremonial armor that seemed to absorb light, and a crown of twisted metal that looked like frozen lightning. Her face was ageless, beautiful in a cold way, and her eyes swept across the gathered colonists with the gaze of someone who had never been denied anything. The colonists instinctively backed away. Even Ruby, who had stood firm against the Seekers, took a step back. The Empress was not just powerful. She was power itself, authority made flesh. Iris bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, the stolen dragon has been located, along with the thief. The colonists are interfering with extraction." Cerelia looked at Ash, who still sat in the center of the square. The young dragon met the Empress's gaze without flinching. "So," Cerelia said quietly, "this is the creature worth abandoning an empire for." She turned her attention to the colonists. "I will say this once. Surrender the dragon and the man called Daniel. Do this now, and no charges will be filed. Refuse, and every person in this colony will be arrested for treason against the Empire. You will spend the rest of your lives in prison. Your families will suffer. Your homes will be seized." The threat hung in the air like poison. Daniel saw the fear in people's faces. They wanted to help, but the Empress was asking them to sacrifice everything. He could not let that happen. "Wait," Daniel shouted. The guard holding him tightened their grip, but he kept talking. "Your Majesty, these people have done nothing wrong. Let them go. I will come willingly if you leave them alone." Ash cried out in dragon tongue, a sound of pure anguish. Cerelia walked slowly toward Daniel. Her guards moved with her, a wall of black armor. She stopped just a few feet away and studied him with those cold eyes. "You are the thief," she said. "I am Ash's father," Daniel corrected. "You stole Imperial property valued at millions of credits. You sabotaged a breeding program designed to protect the Empire. You have hidden on the edge of civilized space like a criminal." Cerilia's voice was calm, almost conversational. "And you call yourself a father?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "Because that is what I am. The dragon is property. She was bred for a purpose. You have interfered with that purpose." Cerilia gestured to Ash. She could have served the Empire with honor. Instead, you have made her weak. Daniel felt anger surge through him. "Weak? You think loving someone makes you weak? You think having a family makes you weak? Love is not relevant. The dragon was created to serve. She was not created." Daniel's voice rose. "She is alive. She thinks, she feels, she has dreams and fears and hopes. She is not a machine you can program. She is a person." The Empress's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. "You truly believe that?" "I know that. I have lived with her for 3 years. I have watched her grow and learn. I have seen her laugh and cry. She is my daughter in every way that matters." Cerilia was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Ash again. "Dragon, approach." Ash hesitated, then slowly walked toward the Empress. Up close, the size difference was dramatic. Ash was large, but the Empress seemed somehow larger, her presence overwhelming. "Did this human force you to stay with him?" Cerilia asked. Ash shook her head. "Did he imprison you? Threaten you?" Another shake. "Then why did you not return to the Empire when you had the chance? Why hide in darkness and cold when you could have luxury and purpose?" Ash looked back at Daniel. Then she spoke again, her young voice steady. "He chose me when no one else did. He saw me, not what I could be used for. He is my father. I am his daughter. That is why." Cerilia stared at the young dragon. "You were taught to speak. He taught me many things. Reading, writing, thinking." Ash's tail swished nervously. "He taught me that I matter." "I see." The Empress turned back to Daniel. "You have corrupted Imperial property with dangerous ideas." "I taught her the truth," Daniel said. "That is not corruption. The truth is what I say it is." But Cerilia's voice lacked conviction. She looked around at the colonists, at the Seekers, at her own guards. Everyone was watching her, waiting to see what she would do. "Bring them both to my ship," she ordered finally. "I want to speak with this human privately." "Your Majesty," Iris protested, "he is dangerous. He could try to escape." "He will not." Cerilia looked at Daniel. "Because if he does, I will take the dragon anyway, and all these colonists will be arrested. He knows this. He will come willingly." She was right. Daniel would not run, not if it meant everyone else would suffer. The guards released him, and he walked forward on his own. Ash moved to follow, but the Empress held up a hand. "The dragon stays here under guard. I wish to speak with the human alone." Daniel wanted to protest, but Ash gave him a small nod. She was trying to be brave. He had to be brave too. The walk to the dreadnought felt like a death march. Daniel climbed the ramp and entered the massive ship. Inside was cold and sterile, all metal and harsh lights. He was led through corridors to a private chamber near the command deck. The room was surprisingly simple. A desk, 2 chairs, and a window showing the colony below. The Empress entered behind him and dismissed her guards. They were alone. Cerilia removed her crown and set it on the desk. Without it, she looked almost human, tired even. "Sit," she said. Daniel sat. He had no idea what was about to happen, but he would face it head on. The Empress sat across from him and studied his face for a long moment. "Tell me, Daniel, why did you do it? Why throw away everything for one dragon?" "Because she was suffering, and I could help. Because it was the right thing to do." "The right thing," Cerilia repeated. "I have ruled this empire for 20 years. I have made decisions that affected billions of lives. I have built armies, crushed rebellions, and maintained order across hundreds of worlds. And you think you know what is right better than I do?" "On this, yes," Daniel said quietly. Cerilia leaned back in her chair. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "I was 12 years old when I became Empress. My entire family was killed in a rebellion, burned alive while I hid in a supply closet. I survived by luck and nothing more. Daniel said nothing. He had not expected this. I crushed that rebellion, Cerelia continued. I executed the leaders and anyone who helped them. Then I built the dragon program to make sure no one could ever threaten the Empire again. I bred an army of creatures strong enough to end any war before it started. And you never asked them what they wanted? Daniel said softly. Cerelia's eyes hardened. What they wanted was irrelevant. No, Daniel said. It was everything. The Emperor stood and walked to the window. Below, the colony square was still filled with people watching and waiting. Ash sat surrounded by guards, her silver scales catching the light. Have you ever spoken to a dragon? Daniel asked. Actually spoken to one. Not given orders? I am the Empress. I do not have conversations with weapons. That is your problem, Daniel said. You see them as weapons. You never saw them as people. Cerelia turned to face him. They're bred for war. They're stronger, faster, and more durable than any natural creature. We feed them, house them, train them. They serve the Empire with honor. They serve because they have no choice. Because you take them from birth and teach them that they exist only to fight. Daniel stood up, his hands clenched. Ash was going to be killed because she was not aggressive enough. She was too gentle, too kind. That is what your program does. It destroys anyone who does not fit your purpose. The weak must be removed to keep the strong intact. She is not weak. Daniel's voice rose. She learned to speak on her own. She reads books meant for adults. She understands complex ideas. She has more empathy in one claw than most humans have in their entire body. That is not weakness. That is strength you do not understand. Cerelia was quiet for a long moment. Then she pressed a button on her desk. Bring the dragon to this room. Alone. Minutes later, Ash was escorted into the chamber. She immediately went to Daniel's side, pressing against him protectively. Her eyes watched the Empress with careful attention. Sit, Cerelia commanded. Ash sat, but she kept her body between Daniel and the Empress. Cerelia walked closer, studying the young dragon. You learned human speech on your own. Daniel taught me, Ash said carefully. But I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand him better. Why? Because he is my father. Because I love him. The words seemed to hang in the air. Cerelia looked genuinely confused. Love. You were taught this concept. I was shown it. Ash corrected. When I was scared, he comforted me. When I was hungry, he gave me food even when he had little. When I had nightmares, he stayed with me until I felt safe. That is love. And in return, what do you give him? Ash thought about this. I try to be good. I try to make him proud. I give him someone to care for. Someone who needs him. She paused. I think he was lonely before. Like me. Cerelia sat down again. She looked between Daniel and Ash, something shifting in her expression. I want to show you something. Both of you. She activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air, showing the dragon breeding facilities. Hundreds of dragons, all perfectly maintained. Training grounds, feeding areas, medical facilities. Everything was clean and organized. This is what dragons in the Empire have, Cerelia said. Structure, purpose. They're fed the best food, given the best care, trained by the best handlers. They want for nothing. Except freedom, Daniel said. Freedom to do what? Wander aimlessly? Make mistakes? Die in meaningless ways? Cerelia shook her head. I offer them something better. A place in something greater than themselves. Did you ever ask them if they wanted it? Ash asked quietly. The question seemed to strike the Empress like a physical blow. She stared at the young dragon, and for the first time, genuine uncertainty showed on her face. I will make you both an offer, Cerelia said finally. Ash, you will see what life in the Empire truly offers. You will visit our finest facilities, meet other dragons, experience what you were supposed to have. Then you'll be brought back here to see your life with Daniel. Your small room, your limited resources, your need to hide. And then, Daniel asked suspiciously, then Ash will choose. If she chooses to return to the Empire willingly, you will not be punished. You will be allowed to live freely. But if she chooses to stay with you, Cerelia paused, then I will let you both go. Daniel could not believe what he was hearing. You would honor that choice? I am curious, Cerelia admitted. I want to know what a dragon truly wants when given freedom to choose. No one has ever asked before. She looked at Ash. Will you accept this test? Ash looked at Daniel with worried eyes. He could see her fear, but he could also see her courage. She was willing to face this for both of them. I accept, Ash said. The next day, Ash was taken aboard the dreadnought. Daniel was allowed to stay in the colony, still under guard but not imprisoned. He spent the hours pacing his small home, unable to eat or sleep. Ruby visited with food he did not touch. She will come back, Ruby said firmly. That dragon loves you. Anyone can see it. But what if she sees what the Empire can offer and decides she wants that life? Daniel's voice was hollow. What if she realizes she would be better off without me? Then you let her go, Ruby said quietly. Because that is what parents do. They let their children choose their own path. 2 days later, Ash returned. She was brought to the colony square where everyone had gathered. The Empress stood on one side with her guards and the gleaming promise of imperial power. Daniel stood on the other side, alone except for Oliver and Ruby beside him. Ash walked slowly between them. She had been shown everything the Empire could offer. Daniel could see it in her eyes. She had seen other dragons, beautiful facilities, unlimited resources. Everything he could never give her. She stopped in the center, looking back and forth. The entire colony held its breath. Then Ash turned toward the Empress. She walked forward, and Daniel felt his heart break. She was choosing the Empire. He could not blame her. What could he offer compared to all that? But Ash did not keep walking to Cerelia. She stopped a few feet away and bowed her head respectfully. Thank you for showing me what you offered, Ash said clearly. It was beautiful. The other dragons were kind. The facilities were amazing. I could have everything there. Then you choose the Empire? Cerelia asked. No. Ash turned and ran to Daniel, wrapping herself around him. I choose my father. I choose home. Daniel could not speak. He wrapped his arms around her neck and held on as tightly as he could. Tears ran down his face, and he did not care who saw them. Why? Cerelia demanded. Why choose this when you could have so much more? Ash looked at the Empress with calm, certain eyes. Because all those things are nice, but they're not love. They're not family. Daniel chose me when no one else did. He saw me, not as what I could do. He gave me everything that matters. She pressed closer to Daniel. This is my home, not because it is big or comfortable, because I'm loved here, because I belong here. The Empress stood very still. Around the square, colonists began to smile. Some wiped tears from their own eyes. Even some of the Imperial guards looked moved. Cerelia walked forward slowly until she stood in front of Daniel and Ash. She looked at them for a long moment, and something ancient and painful crossed her face. Then she reached up and removed Daniel's shackles herself. The metal shackles fell to the ground with a clatter that seemed to echo across the entire colony. Daniel stared at the Empress, not understanding what was happening. Cerelia stepped back and addressed not just him, but everyone gathered. I became Empress at 12 years old, she said, her voice carrying across the square. I learned to rule through strength, through control. I built an empire on the belief that order and purpose were everything. She paused, looking at Ash. I never asked what anyone wanted. I simply decided for them. The crowd was silent, listening. This dragon has shown me something I have not seen in 30 years of rule. She has shown me what choice looks like, what love looks like. Cerelia turned to her guards, her advisors, her seekers. I hereby declare that Ash is no longer imperial property. She is a free citizen with all rights and protections. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Iris looked shocked, but Cerelia was not finished. She raised her voice, speaking with the authority of absolute power. Furthermore, I decree that all dragons currently in imperial service will be given the same choice Ash was given. They may stay and serve willingly, with full citizenship and fair compensation, or they may leave and build their own lives. Force will no longer be used. Breeding will no longer be mandatory. Dragons are people, and they will be treated as such. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Ruby started clapping. Oliver joined her. Soon the entire colony was applauding, and the sound grew until it seemed to shake the sky itself. Daniel looked down at Ash, who was staring at the Empress with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Why?" Daniel asked quietly. "Why change everything now?" Cerelia met his gaze. "Because you showed me what I had become. A tyrant who enslaved thinking beings, because I was afraid of losing control. I built my empire on fear, and I told myself it was necessary. But you, a simple engineer with nothing but love for a dragon child, you showed me another way." She smiled. It was sad and genuine. "You had the courage I lacked. The courage to choose compassion over safety. To choose family over everything else." "What about the advisors?" Daniel asked. "The military? They will not accept this." "They will accept it because I command it," Cerelia said firmly. "And if they refuse, they will be replaced. I'm still Empress. My word is still law. But from now on, that law will be just." Iris stepped forward, her face tight with anger. "Your Majesty, this is madness. The dragons are our greatest weapon. Without them, the Empire is vulnerable." "No, Sarilia Kerektiv. With them as slaves, we were vulnerable to our own cruelty. Now we have a chance to build something better. Dragons who choose to fight will fight harder than those forced to fight. Dragons who are treated with dignity will be loyal in ways slavery can never achieve." She turned back to Daniel and Ash. "I cannot undo the past. I cannot give back the years you spent hiding and afraid. But I can give you the future. Stay here in Redstone Point if you wish. Build your life. Raise your daughter. You have my protection." Daniel felt Ash trembling against him, not from fear, but from overwhelming emotion. He looked down at her and saw tears in her golden eyes. "You are safe now," he whispered. "Truly safe." Ash pressed her head against his chest. "We both are." The Empress prepared to leave. Her guards formed up, and the Dreadnought's engines began warming. But before she boarded, Cerelia turned one last time. "Daniel," she called. He looked up. "Thank you," she said simply. "You saved more than one dragon today. You saved an empire from its own darkness." Then she was gone, ascending the ramp into the massive ship. The Dreadnought lifted slowly, its engines roaring. It climbed through the atmosphere and disappeared into the stars, taking with it an old way of thinking and leaving behind the seeds of something new. The colonists celebrated that night. They brought out food and drink, and for the first time in 3 years, Ash did not have to hide. She walked openly through the colony, greeting people who came to touch her scales and hear her speak. Children asked her questions, and she answered patiently. Adults thanked her for her courage. Ruby brought Daniel a cup of something strong. "You did it," she said. "You changed the empire." "I just try to protect my daughter," Daniel replied. "That is exactly what changed the empire," Ruby smiled. "One person caring about one life. That is how everything important begins." Over the following weeks, news spread across the galaxy. Dragons everywhere were offered the choice. Some stayed with the military, proud of their service but grateful for their new rights and pay. Others left to explore the galaxy, to find their own purposes. Many came to Redstone Point, drawn by the story of a young dragon who chose love over luxury. The colony grew. New buildings were constructed to house the growing population of dragons and the humans who came to meet them. Daniel found himself busier than ever, but it was good busy. He was building homes instead of hiding. He was creating a community instead of running from one. Oliver started a transport service specializing in carrying dragons who wanted to travel. Ruby became the unofficial ambassador between the colony and the empire, negotiating trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Iris, surprisingly, requested a transfer to Redstone Point to learn what she had missed about dragons during her years as a seeker. Empress Cerelia visited twice a year. She and Daniel developed an unlikely friendship, two leaders learning from each other. She asked his advice on reforms, and he asked hers on how to manage a growing community. Sometimes she brought gifts for Ash, books mostly, and they would sit together while Ash read aloud. 5 years after that day in the colony square, Daniel stood outside his home watching the sunset. The home was bigger now, with proper space for a growing dragon. Ash was inside, reading to a group of younger dragons who had come to learn from her. She emerged and sat beside him, her scales gleaming in the fading light. She was fully grown now, powerful and beautiful, but she still pressed against his side like she had when she was small and scared. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am," Daniel said honestly. "How one choice changed everything." "You mean choosing to save me?" "I mean choosing to love you," he corrected. Everything else followed from that. Ash was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am writing a book about what happened, about how one human's compassion changed an empire. What will you call it?" Ash looked at him with warm, golden eyes. "I will call it what you always told me when I was afraid." The three words that meant everything. "What words?" "You're safe now." Daniel smiled and put his arm around her neck. Around them, the colony was alive with the sounds of dragons and humans living together, building something new. The empire was changing slowly but surely, because one engineer had looked at a frightened dragon child and seen a daughter. Because sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply to care. The stars came out above them, bright and infinite. Somewhere out there, other dragons were making their own choices, finding their own paths. The Empire was learning what it meant to be just instead of merely powerful. And here on Redstone Point, in a small home filled with books and love, a father and daughter sat together watching the night sky, finally and completely free. "I love you, Dad," Ash said quietly. "I love you too," Daniel replied. "Always." They sat together as darkness fell, two beings from different worlds who had found in each other exactly what they needed. A family, a home, a future built not on fear or power, but on the simple, revolutionary choice to see each other as worthy of love. And in the end, that choice had changed everything.